Hey everybody, it's Joe Trippi, and welcome back to That Trippi Show with my co-host, Alex Sashlow. This week, we have some big news to announce. Alex, where do you want to get started?
So, first of all, we owe Chris an apology. Chris in Ohio. Chris asked a really good question like 3 weeks ago when we were doing our State of the Union stuff, and we didn't intentionally skip you, but we did hold on to it for today. Joe's been teasing it for a couple of weeks. We actually have two pieces of big news to announce. But Joe, I want to tee you up from this question from Chris. He asks, Joe, how long do you think it will reasonably start to match what they are doing with Twitter and Fox News? When will it have an impact on elections? I'm starting to worry about 2026. And you can see why, Joe, I think that's a perfect segue for your two big announcements today.
Well, I mean, we announced last week that Says Us is now open and launching. And it's really important. People don't understand. I mean, just a lot of the people I talk to, it's like, why with Blue Sky and, everything else that's going on? None of them will become pro-democracy social movements that impact social networks that empower instead of exploiting people and empower you with the tools to fight back with the truth that you need to hear from people who are posting like Adam Kensinger, Rick Wilson, and others. We are building a pro-democracy social network and a distribution amplifier, information distribution that fights back the propaganda that's on X, that's on Fox, and yes, there's only 10,000 people on it right now. But if you join and tell your friends, and we all start talking to our friends, our coworkers, our family members, and we start to build our own network, which is part of the other thing we've been talking about on the podcast for some time. They own We Rent. They own X. They own Fox. They own Sinclair Broadcasting. The chairman of Sinclair Broadcasting uses the profits from the ads we buy renting from Sinclair, their airtime. He uses that money to buy the Baltimore Sun. That's what they've been doing for decades, and it's totally destroyed not only the information system, but fragmented any ability to stop and fight back against their propaganda. There is no platform. It's never been built. Well, we're building it. Look, democracy's hard work. It's going to take all of us. And yeah, I was there early days of Twitter when there were only 10,000 people. Look at where it grew to. So, stay on the other networks, stay on X, stay on Blue Sky. But democracy's hard work. And, a lot of people have had to worry about a hell of a lot more than cutting and pasting what they were doing on Blue Sky and doing it on Says Us. And now on Says Us, you can literally post on Says Us and Blue Sky and X with just one post on Says Us. So I hope people will check that out. I hope people will look at what we're trying to do. It's completely different. It's a civil, safe, clean, pro-democracy stack, a technology stack that we're continuing to evolve as we raise more money to build out more tools. Right now, it needs people. And so I hope if you're listening to the podcast and you are part of the pro-democracy movement, that you'll join Says Us.
I just want to point one thing about Says that I've really enjoyed, and I think it's unique and definitely, I think something that we needed for a long time. The way that posts show up in your feed, and I don't think we've ever really gotten into this. There is no algorithm designed to pump certain types of ads or certain users' content into your system. It is all the people on Says. When you post and when you join, you get a certain number of reputation points. You use those reputation points to recommend, upvote, downvote, or categorize the posts that come up. So what you see in your feeds on Says is what real people are saying is interesting or recommend. It's kind of what you wanted some of the other networks to be a long time ago, but it's really exciting to actually see it in live in person. we have gotten a few questions on how it works. So I just wanted to share that with people. Joe, I don't want to see if you had your thinking behind it, but I really like how it's working.
Well, no, the whole idea is to replicate the town square where if you put your reputation out there, if you work to build a good reputation, if you have a good reputation in town, people respect you and they want to listen to what you have to say. And if you develop a bad reputation in the town square, basically you get zero reach. No one wants to hear you. So what happens is the bad actors, we say it says us that you have freedom of speech, guaranteed. Say what you want, but you don't have a guarantee of amplified reach. In other words, the algorithm's never going to amplify. In fact, the opposite. Bad actors, anonymous name callers go to zero reach, and they're talking to themselves. You don't have to hear them. And so it really is sort of a civil, safe space to discuss what you wanna discuss. I mean, the great thing about when you go in, you'll see across the top, there's all kinds of categories that you can go look at, not what's trending, but, what are posts that are talking about the news or about sports, posts that are endearing, posts for advocacy, where you can, what are people talking about action that you can take? So it's a completely new and different. In fact, Fast Company wrote probably the first thing that we saw about Says Us, saying that it was a completely different approach and that our reputation system could actually help people weed out all the bad actors. And look, if that's what our first step, but the next step is you and building that pro-democracy movement. It's starting to build right now on Says Us, and, join us there. SEZ well, go to your app store because 'cause we're now in that's what we were really waiting for before we went, started talking a lot about it was to get in the app store. Google put us in about 3 weeks ago. Apple put us in their app store for iPhones, iOS devices about 10, 15 days ago, so we're ready to roll.
The one thing about Tesla, and it's like this with any new network, it is pretty new. I know, Joe, I've run into a bug or two. The team's been pretty good at quashing them, but kind of part of the process at this point.
Yeah, well, that's what all these early adopters have done for us, and there's still others that we'll find, but look, have patience with us. We've built this not with billionaires funding us, but with me, a few friends scraping up whatever money we could. I wrote a $75,000 check myself, but the software engineers are brilliant. They can't fix everything all at once, and it might not be as intuitive as you're used to. If you have trouble figuring out how to post or any of that, just ask the Says Us team, on the platform or reach out to us because they, as you said, Alex, they're very quick. They respond immediately and they fix it or they help tutor. There's ways to learn how to use the network. So have patience, folks, but help us build it.
It's awesome to hear. It's awesome to see it grow. I know we're both posting on it all the time. You have been since the beginning, but I will continue to drag people kicking and screaming into it. Trippi, what's the other piece of news you wanted to talk about today?
Well, the other thing is Resolute Square, which you hear us talk about at the end of every show about how we're part of the Resolute Square network, et cetera. And, please go check us out there. Is we're rebranding it as Lincoln Square. Resolute Square was kind of launched, actually, not kind of, it was launched by a lot of us in the Lincoln Project, again, with the same idea of creating a platform for media, a platform for podcasts, for shows, for more information, and again, distribute our own distribution channel. And so we've rebranded that as Lincoln Square, made it pretty clear of the connection to the original idea came from Lincoln Project founders and advisors. And so it's a Substack now. Go to Lincoln Square on Substack, join it, and you'll see, I think, some real interesting, not just things to read, but great shows there. Eventually, we're just starting to work all that out, but it is announced now. We've had Joyce Vance, Simon Rosenberg, uh, Tim Miller, already doing lives at Lincoln Square on Substack. So if you're on Substack, check out Lincoln Square on Substack. And we'll put a link into the show notes as well.
It's kind of nice to actually talk about what we're doing about things rather than react to every really insane thing that's happening in the world right now. Joe, anything you got your eye on in the news? Otherwise, we're going to keep this one pretty short today.
No, look, the usual craziness is going on. Look, I do think there's one piece of thing to look at. We talk about polls and about how don't look at the polls and all that stuff. And yes, we talk about Trump's job approval on the economy plummeting, but there's some data now that confirms that, which is again looking under the hood. And that's the consumer confidence has dropped to 57, which it's not that's not a percentage number. That's just an indication of consumer sentiment, which is very low. That's historically haven't seen that number in 47 years. I think it goes back to. And so when you see that lack of what happens is people tend to stop spending when they get to that sentiment level. They start saving because they're being cautious and careful. And if that continue, I mean, this is sort of like one of those things where it confirms what we're seeing in the polling, but more, I think it does speak to, despite what otherwise was a strong economy that Trump inherited, no matter what he says, it is now because of the uncertainty, because of the tariffs, because of all the crazy stuff he's doing, the firings, et cetera, it's starting to really impact the voter. And I think we are seeing some of that in the polls, but I actually think the consumer confidence index is a better indicator. In other words, it's the polls are lagging where consumer confidence is and will again, it's a sort of now becoming sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. In other words, they're each sort of plug into each other. That's not easy to pull out of. And so I think you're going to see more economic disenchantment with Trump, aside from all the unconstitutional lying, the breaking, the law breaking. But I keep our eye on that.
I don't think it's fallen this low since I with COVID. You're right. It's historically low.
Yeah, 57's been hit before, but it going back, I think, the 2000, the Great Recession, et cetera. Over 47 years, that is the low mark. In other words, no matter how far sentiment has fallen, it's generally stopped at 57. I'm not sure that's going to happen this time. We could see, I mean, that's already a historic low, but it could fall further. If so, I think his numbers and disenchantment with him, specifically on the economy, which was where he promised everybody, snap your fingers, I'll end inflation in a day. Well, it's egg prices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And hey, the avian bird flu was always the main culprit, at least on egg prices, but he didn't blame it on there. It's bird flu, but he made that bet. And all the rest of it is not going down either. Inflation's still hovering around 2.83%. And that's because even the Fed's target on a good day is 2. So, in other words, the Fed is targeting inflation only going up 2 points a year. Well, that means prices are going up. It's something Donald Trump never understood about inflation. We all wanted to go back to gas prices in the 1970s when it was 25 cents a gallon. But there's a reason that today it's where it is because it's inflation over all that time. And so, yeah, prices are going to continue to go up. And I think fundamentally the problem here is with the income disparity that we have. The rich again are getting richer, and people, living 50,000 or less, making 50,000 or less, are getting hit harder and harder every day, even with that 2.8% inflation that we're seeing.
Yeah, that's a cheery note to end on, Joe. You got anything else for us today?
Oh no, actually, I'm feeling pretty optimistic that we can build the movement. And, there's things going on. There's April 5th, I think, is a day where people are going to take action. We'll definitely talk about that next show. But we are building the tools. That's what Says Us is about. That's what Lincoln Square is about. And it's not just Lincoln Square. There are plenty, or Says Us. There are plenty of groups out there that are coming together. The one thing that's going to happen on Says Us is we're about to launch channels, so you can create your own groups, whether they're just your family and friends, or something like the Resistance channel. Which if that, and we're going to launch a Resistance channel called the Beacon. But there are lots of things that are about to really break open, and you can be part of it and be there in the beginning and launch it, and hopefully in 2026 be part of millions of people that are on Says Us and in a pro democracy movement to take this on. So that's, I think, a good place to end this. Thanks, Alex, and thanks everyone for listening to that Trippy show. As I said, this has been a big plug for everybody to join Says Us. It's live, and you can join us on the web at sez.us. But fundamentally, you want to go to, if you have an iPhone or an Android, go to your app store and ask for SEZ us, Says Us, and download us and join. This podcast will now always be free and is part of Lincoln Square. So check out the latest at lincolnsquare.media. Please subscribe to That Trippy Show and leave a review on Apple or wherever you listen. Also, if you're listening to this episode on YouTube, please like and subscribe to get alerts when we post the next episode. You can always send us a question to thattrippyshow@gmail.com or leave us a question in a review on iTunes. We'll see you next week.